Four calling birds. That's the verse in the song today. My true love sent to me four calling birds. Now, history equates the calling birds to the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. And those Gospels show the Christ child, which this whole song is about, coming as in Matthew, a divine man, in Mark, a winged lion. And don't know why they use the word winged, but that's just historical stuff. In Luke as an ox, and in John as an eagle. And that's really interesting when you take that back to the Old Testament, because the whole of the Old Testament is talking about Jesus who arrives as a baby in the manger. There's each of the 12 tribes had a standard or a flag that they would carry. They would walk along and somebody would be the flag bearer. And as they camped, those flags would be put in the ground, I guess, or on a flagpole to signify which tribe was camped there. And the tabernacle that was built in the wilderness that they picked up, packed up and carried off to the next place when God told them to move, there was a particular order that the tribes camped around the tabernacle. And when you looked at that from above, you may recall the story of Balaam and his talking donkey, and he was instructed to curse the Israelites and he couldn't. He was looking down on the camp and he saw them camped in the shape of a cross. Now, I'm not sure what the significance in Balaam's mind was, or whether there was some other things that he was seeing as a prophet at that time, although on the wrong side, but he wouldn't curse the Israelites. And it's really interesting how God just sets all these kind of things up for us. So we've got Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, the four Gospels, the four calling birds. Their standards were a man, a lion, an ox and an eagle. That's what those books are talking about. Matthew talks about Jesus as the man. Mark talks about him as the lion. Luke talks about him as the ox, and John talks about him as an eagle. So a lot more study into that than we've got time for right here. Let me move along. Reuben camped on the south. His standard was a man. Judah camped on the east. His standard was a lion. Ephraim camped on the west. His standard was an ox. Dan camped at the north. His standard was an eagle. And they were the lead tribes that camped on those four places. And because of the numbers of tribes in their little group of tribes, the shape formed a cross. Interestingly too, that in Ezekiel we see this divine chariot that Ezekiel talks about, four animals with four faces, a lion, a man, an ox and an eagle. God is so good how he weaves everything together, and I think he might have had an input into the guy that made up this song. So day 4, partridge in a pear tree.